Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're really digging into the man behind the sunglasses, behind the cameos, behind the Excelsior. We're looking past the myth.
Yeah, we're talking about Stan Lee. Or maybe more accurately, Stanley Martin Lieber.
Exactly. It's almost impossible to overstate his impact, isn't it? Taking Timely Comics, this small, kind of struggling outfit.
Right, which went through various names, Atlas Comics for a while.
Yeah, that confusing period. And he turns it into Marvel Comics, this just multimedia giant we know today.
And that's the journey we're mapping out. It's this incredible, almost paradoxical creative life. Our sources let us look at the whole thing, the full 95 years.
So this isn't just going to be a list of superheroes he created.
No, not at all. We're starting way back. Son of Romanian Jewish immigrants dreaming of being a serious novelist.
The great American novel, right? That was the goal.
That was the dream. Then we track him through those two really intense decades as Marvel's main creative force. You know, the collaborations with Kirby, with Ditko, legendary, but also really, really complicated.
Contentious even.
Definitely contentious. And we follow it right up to the end, which, frankly, got pretty messy with legal stuff, personal challenges. It's a complex story.
So our mission today is sort of threefold, right? First, the young guy, Stanley Lieber, trying to write serious stuff, kind of looking down on comics.
Phase one.
Phase two.
Yeah.
The revolutionary editor, the guy who flits the script in the 60s, making superheroes flawed, human.
The Marv boom. Yeah.
And then phase three. Stan Lee the brand, the public face, the figurehead, almost bigger than the comics themselves, sometimes overshadowing the artists who helped build it all. We want to look at the surprising details behind that whole myth.
Exactly. Let's dive in. Okay, so to get Stan Lee, you really have to start with Stanley Martin Lieber, born December 28th, 1922, Manhattan.
Right in the city.
Yeah. His parents, Celia and Jack Lieber, were Romanian Jewish immigrants. His dad, Jack, was a dress cutter.
Tough trade, especially after the Depression hit.
Oh, absolutely. Work was really sporadic. The family struggled a lot financially. They moved around constantly trying to find cheaper places. Eventually, they ended up in the Bronx in this, tiny third-floor apartment. Pretty cramped life.
And that background, that struggle, that's what fuels his big ambition here, Einman. But it wasn't comics.
No way. He was aiming high. He wanted to be a serious writer. The great American novel. That was the phrase he kept using.
It's so key to understanding him, isn't it? That when he needed a name for his comic book work, he chose Stan Lee.
Yeah, the pseudonym. He was genuinely embarrassed to put his real name, Stanley Martin Lieber, on comic books. He thought they were, lowbrow. Pulp.
He wanted to save his real name for the fancy literary stuff he planned to write someday.
Exactly. And that tension between wanting literary prestige and actually working in commercial pulp, it kind of defines his whole career in a way.
His early influences are interesting, too. He loved adventure stories, movies, especially Errol Flynn, right?
Loved Errol Flynn. And he specifically mentioned the Scarlet Pimpernel, the hero with the secret identity as the first superhero he'd read about. Kind of foreshadowing, maybe.
Maybe. But in the meantime, he had to make money. And the jobs he took.
Wow.
Oh, man, the list is something else. He's dreaming of literary fame, but he's writing obituaries for a news service.
Grim.
Totally. Writing press releases for the National Tuberculosis Center, delivering sandwiches around Rockefeller Center, ushering at the Rivoli Theater on Broadway, hustling subscriptions for the New York Herald Tribune. He was doing everything.
Just trying to scrape by.
Yeah.
And that Tribune connection leads to one of those classic Stan Lee stories, doesn't it? The essay contest.
Oh, yes. The biggest news of the week contest.
Yeah.
This is a great example of the Stan Lee myth-making machine in action, even early on.
What's famous version he told? The story he loved telling was that he entered this contest in high school and won first prize 3 weeks in a row. So amazing, apparently, that the newspaper basically told him, okay, kid, stop entering, let someone else have a chance. He claimed it probably changed his life.
Sounds like a perfect origin story. Too perfect?
Well, yeah. The fact-checking suggests something slightly less dramatic. It seems more likely he won a 7th place prize, got $2.50, and maybe a couple of honorable mentions.
So he did win something, just not quite the legend he spun later.
Exactly. It wasn't this life-altering, unprecedented triumph, but it shows you, even from a young age, he knew how to craft a good story, especially about himself. That self-aggrandizing flair was there early on.
Okay, so he's got this literary ambition, he's doing odd jobs. How does he actually land in the comic book world? At Timely Comics?
Pure nepotism, basically. It shows how small that world was then. In 1939, his uncle, Robbie Solomon, got him an assistant job at Timely Comics.
Timely was run by Martin Goodman.
Yeah, Martin Goodman, a pulp magazine publisher known for being pretty shrewd. And here's the closer family tie. Goodman's wife, Jean, was actually Stan's cousin.
Ah, okay. So it's really a family favor. Who hired him specifically?
Joe Simon, the editor at the time, co-creator of Captain America along with Jack Kirby. So pretty legendary folks already there.
And his first duties were not glamorous.
Oh, not at all. It was the absolute grunt work, making sure the artists' inkwells were full. They dipped quill pens back then, fetching lunch orders, proofreading pages.
And the erasing?
Yeah, the really tedious job. Erasing all the stray pencil lines from the finished ink pages before they went to the printer. Hours and hours of that.
But he didn't stay the eraser boy for long. He got his first published work pretty quickly. Huh?
Yeah, May 1941, Captain America Comics, #3. It was a text filler piece, just prose, no pictures, called Captain America Foils the Traitor's Revenge.
And that's where Stan Lee first appears.
That's the first time he used the pseudonym. And fun fact, that little text story, which was mostly there to qualify for cheaper postal rates.
Mm-hmm. Huh. Really?
Yeah. It actually introduced Captain America's iconic shield-throwing technique, bouncing it off walls. That came from Stan Lee's filler text.
Wow. So even his first tiny piece had a huge impact.
Kind of amazing, isn't it? And he quickly started writing actual comic scripts and even co-creating some characters like the Destroyer in Mystic Comics, #6, August 41, and some other less remembered heroes like Jack Frost and Father Time.
So he's moving up.
Yeah.
But then comes this huge shakeup. Simon and Kirby leave.
Right. Late 1941, they had a big fight with Goodman over money, royalties, that kind of thing. So they walked out.
Leaving Goodman without an editor.
Exactly. And who does he turn to? Stanley Lieber. The kid who'd been there just a couple of years doing assistant work and some writing. He makes him interim editor.
How old was he, like 18, 19?
Just under 19 years old. It's kind of unbelievable. And that interim job, he basically kept it until 1972, eventually becoming publisher himself. Decades in charge.
That's an insane promotion for a teenager, running a whole comic line. Of course, World War II interrupts things for a bit.
Right. 1942 to 1945, he's in the Army. Stateside service, thankfully. He started in the Signal Corps, doing things like repairing telegraph poles, not exactly using his writing skills.
But they figured out he could write eventually.
Yeah, they transferred him to the training film division. Now he's writing training manuals, film scripts, slogans, maybe even doing some cartooning. This is where he gets that classification he loved to talk about.
Playwright.
Playwright. He often boasted he was one of only 9 men in the entire U.S. Army with that classification. Whether that's strictly true or another Stan Lee embellishment, who knows? But it sounds good.
And the people he worked with in that division. It's incredible.
Seriously legendary. Frank Capra, the Oscar-winning director. Charles Addams, creator of the Addams Family. Theodore Geisel.
Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss himself. Imagine that writer's room.
Unbelievable talent pool.
Yeah.
But even while he's serving, he's still got deadlines for Timely Comics back in New York.
Oh, yeah. He had to keep churning out scripts, which leads to this absolutely wild story about meeting a deadline.
The mailbox incident.
The mailbox incident. Apparently, he got his timely assignments mailed to him every Friday, due back Monday. One week, the mail clerk messes up, doesn't give him the envelope. Stan sees it locked in the mailroom over the weekend.
And he needs it now.
Desperately. So he finds a screwdriver and literally unscrews the mailbox, hinges from the wall to get his assignment out.
You cannot make this stuff up. That's
I'd say.
Extreme dedication to Timely Comics.
Right. Tampering with government property, an officer sees him, reports him. He's facing serious charges, maybe even prison time at Leavenworth.
How did he get out of it?
Apparently, a friendly colonel in the finance department intervened and somehow got the charges dropped. But it just shows you the chaos, the pressure, the commitment he already had to this job he supposedly didn't even respect that much.
Okay, so the war ends, he comes back. He's still at Timely, which is now kind of drifting, right? This is the period between the Golden Age boom and the 60s Marvel explosion, the Atlas years.
Exactly. The late 40s and the 50s, superheroes were basically dead after the war. The market shifted completely.
What was popular then?
Horror, romance, westerns, crime stories, war comics. That's what Timely Atlas was publishing, and that's what Stan was writing. Tons of it. Prolific, but not exactly creatively fulfilling for him.
And Goodman kept changing the company name. Timely. Atlas.
Yeah, Goodman was always restructuring, shuffling imprints, maybe trying to look smaller or just distance himself from failed trends. It was a period of chasing whatever genre was hot.
Trend chasing, not visionary creation.
Pretty much. And then came the big chill. 1954, the Comics Code Authority.
Ah, Frederick Wertham, Seduction of the Innocent.
Yeah.
The Moral Panic.
Right. Suddenly, horror and crime comics are basically banned by this industry self-censorship code. Atlas has to pivot again, back towards like watered-down sci-fi and monster stories.
Yeah.
Lee felt totally boxed in. The medium felt intellectually dead, commercially shaky. He was really, really considering quitting by the late 50s. He'd had enough.
Okay, so the scene is set. Stan Lee is editor at Atlas Comics, feeling burnt out, creatively stifled, ready to walk away. And then his publisher, Martin Goodman, gives him an assignment.
The assignment that changes everything, it was purely reactive, actually. DC Comics had hit it big again.
Reviving superheroes.
Yeah, they revamped The Flash, made him faster, sleeker. Then they launched the Justice League of America, grouping their heroes. And it was a huge success. Goodman saw DC printing money and basically said to Stan, hey, we need a superhero team too, now.
But Stan was already planning to quit, which ironically was maybe the best thing that could have happened.
Absolutely. He felt like he had zero to lose. And this is where his wife, Joan, comes in with that legendary piece of advice.
Right. She basically said,
She said something like, look, if you're quitting anyway, why not just once write a story the way you want to write it? Create characters you actually find interesting. What's the worst that can happen?
get fired from a job you're already quitting.
Exactly. Nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And that advice, that's the spark. That's the genesis of the Marvel Revolution.
And the core idea was,
Flawed humanity. Naturalistic characters. He decided to create heroes who weren't perfect archetypes like Superman. These guys would have real problems. Bad tempers, bouts of depression, money worries.
worrying about paying the rent, relationship troubles.
Yeah, they'd bicker, they'd get jealous, they'd even get sick sometimes. They felt like real people who just happened to have superpowers. It was a radical departure from the norm.
It really captured the vibe of the 60s, didn't it? I remember reading somewhere that DC was like the polished MGM studio, while Marvel was like the gritty French New Wave cinema.
That's a great analogy. Marvel felt more grounded, more focused on character, tackling contemporary issues. They were aiming for an older audience, too, especially college kids who were starting to take comics more seriously.
And that flawed humanity connected with the anxieties of the time, right? The Cold War, civil rights.
Definitely. Think about the early characters. The Hulk, a direct result of a gamma bomb tapping into nuclear fear.
Uncontrolled science.
Exactly. Or the X-Men teenagers, born different, feared and hated by society. Mutants. It was a clear parallel to the civil rights movement, exploring prejudice.
And Spider-Man. Maybe the ultimate example.
Oh, absolutely. Peter Parker wasn't some billionaire playboy or an alien. He was this nerdy high school kid from Queens, awkward, insecure, constantly worried about his Aunt May's health and bills, racked with guilt over Uncle Ben. He was the quintessential teenager with superpowers, so relatable.
The creative explosion was almost immediate, wasn't it? Started with the Fantastic Four in '61.
Yep, Lee and Jack Kirby. The Fantastic Four weren't just a team. They were a dysfunctional family. They argued, they got on each other's nerves, it felt real, and they were an instant hit. That just opened the floodgates.
And over the next couple of years, 61 to 63, basically the entire foundation of the Marvel Universe gets laid down.
It's staggering when you list them. With Kirby, you get Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, the X-Men, and then bringing them together as the Avengers.
And not just Kirby. He's collaborating with other key artists, too.
Right. Daredevil with Bill Everett. And then, crucially, with Steve Ditko, you get Doctor Strange. And the biggest hit of them all, Spider-Man.
We have to talk about Spider-Man's creation, because it really highlights the artist's role and hints at the conflicts to come. Lee didn't go to Ditko first, did he?
No, originally he asked Kirby to design Spider-Man, but Kirby's version came back. Well, to Kirby. Too heroic, muscular, confident. Not the everyday kid Lee envisioned.
So he turned to Ditko.
Yeah, and Ditko delivered something completely different. This skinny, awkward kid in glasses, kind of slumped over. The visual perfectly captured that vulnerability, the everyman quality Lee wanted. It showed how much Lee relied on the artist not just to draw, but to really define the character's look and feel. They were co-creators in a very real sense.
Which leads directly to the Marvel method, right?
Sure.
The system Lee developed to handle this insane workload.
Insane is the word. By the mid-60s, Lee was brainstorming plots, writing synopses, scripting dialogue for almost every book, writing his Stan's Soapbox column, answering letters, doing publicity. It was nuts. The Marvel method was born out of necessity.
Okay, break down how it actually worked, because it's pretty different from how comics were usually made.
Very different.
Yeah.
So step one, Stan would talk over the basic plot idea with the artist, say, Kirby or Ditko. Just a rough concept. Maybe Dr. Doom attacks the Baxter building.
Not a full script.
No, not even close. He'd give them maybe a 1 or 2 page synopsis, just the main beats. Step 2. The artist takes that synopsis and runs with it. They figure out the panel-to-panel storytelling, the pacing, the action sequences, how the story flows visually across 20 pages. They're basically plotting the whole thing out in pictures.
So the artist is doing the primary storytelling visually.
Essentially, yes. They were acting as co-plotters. Step 3. The artist delivers the finished pencil pages, sometimes with little notes in the margins about what's happening. Then Stanley would come back in.
And add the words.
Right. He'd write the dialogue, the captions, the thought balloons, adding that distinctive Stan Lee voice, the character interactions, the humor, the angst. Then it would go off for lettering and coloring, which he'd also oversee.
It sounds efficient for Lee, definitely. But you can immediately see how that could lead to problems over credit, right? If the artist is figuring out the entire visual narrative.
Bingo! That's the core issue that plagued Marvel for decades, especially with Kirby and Ditko. They felt, quite reasonably, that they were doing the bulk of the creative work, the actual storytelling. Kirby, later on, often referred to himself as the writer-artist on those books.
So how did Lee justify taking the main story by Stan Lee credit, with the artist often just getting art by?
Well, the official line, in Lee's defense, usually rested on a couple of things. One, the initial concept often came from him, or a joint discussion, though even that was disputed. Kirby claimed many core ideas were solely his.
Okay, and the second point?
The voice. Lee absolutely controlled the tone, the characterization, the specific way these heroes talked and thought. He brought the sophisticated vocabulary, the self-doubt, the humor. He created the personality of Marvel Comics, not just through the dialogue, but through the bullpen bulletins, the letter columns, that whole chatty insider feel. He argued that while the artist drew the action, he provided the soul.
And that voice was unique, using bigger words, complex sentences.
Yeah, he famously said something like, if a kid has to go to a dictionary, that's not the worst thing that could happen. He was deliberately aiming higher, making comics feel smarter, more grown up.
He also built this amazing sense of community, didn't he? The Marvel bullpen.
Totally. Through the bullpen bulletins page and the way he answered letters, he created this persona for the whole creative team. They were your friendly, slightly wacky pals making comics. Fans felt connected. They stopped writing Dear Editor and started writing Dear Stan and Jack or Dear Stan and Steve.
It made the whole thing feel less corporate, more personal, like a club.
Exactly. And that connection, that popularity, allowed them to push boundaries socially, too. They weren't afraid to be relevant.
Like introducing Black Panther.
Huge moment. 1966, Fantastic Four #52 with Kirby, T'Challa, the first black superhero in mainstream comics. And not just a sidekick, an African king, ruler of this technologically advanced nation, Wakanda. Really groundbreaking stuff.
And then the Falcon followed a few years later.
Yep. 1969, Captain America, #117, with artist Gene Colan, Sam Wilson, the first black American superhero. They were consciously reflecting the changing times.
What about the creative peak with Kirby? People often point to the Galactus story.
The Galactus trilogy, yeah. Fantastic Four, #4850. Introducing Galactus, the Silver Surfer. It was epic, cosmic, philosophical even, dealing with the end of the world. Comics historians noted how huge that story was on college campuses. Kids were analyzing it like it was literature.
And Spider-Man stayed relevant too, right?
Yeah.
Especially when John Rivas Sr. took over the art.
Oh, yeah. Lee and Romita really leaned into Peter Parker's college life, his social anxieties. They tackled stuff like Vietnam War protests, student activism, political campaigns, right there in the pages of Amazing Spider-Man. Marvel wasn't shying away from the real world anymore.
It was embracing it, all under that banner, that catchphrase.
Excelsior, ever upward. It perfectly captured the energy of that whole era, didn't it? Always pushing, always creating something new.
That drive for realism, for tackling real-world issues, inevitably put Marvel on a collision course with the industry's big gatekeeper, didn't it? The Comics Code Authority.
Oh, absolutely. And you really have to understand how much power the CCA had back then. Since '54, it was basically mandatory censorship. If your comic didn't have that little CCA seal of approval on the cover,
Distributors wouldn't touch it.
many wouldn't. Major retailers wouldn't stock it. You were essentially locked out of the market. Publishing without the code seal was a huge financial gamble.
So defying them was a massive risk. And ironically, the whole thing started because the government asked Lee to do something.
Isn't that wild? Yeah, in 1971, the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare actually approached Stan Lee. They wanted him to do a story about the dangers of drug abuse, like a public service announcement in comic form.
So Lee agrees, puts a story in Spider-Man.
Right. A 3-issue subplot in Amazing Spider-Man, issues 96 through 98. It shows Peter Parker's friend, Harry Osborn, getting hooked on prescription pills. It's clearly an anti-drug story.
The code had rules about depicting drugs at all.
Exactly. The comics code explicitly forbade any depiction of drug use, regardless of context. Didn't matter if it was anti-drug. So the CCA refused to grant the seal.
Just pure bureaucratic rigidity. Nope. Rule says no drugs, doesn't matter why.
Pretty much. But Lee and Martin Goodman saw an opening here. They had the government's requests backing them up. They felt confident, so they made a bold move.
They published it anyway, without the seal.
They did. Didn't censor the story, just put it out there without the CCA approval. A huge gamble.
What happened? Did sales tank?
Nope. The opposite. The comic sold really well. People respected the story, the realism. Marvel got tons of praise for being socially conscious. And the CCA, they looked completely foolish, standing in the way of a government-requested public health message.
It must have been humiliating for them.
Totally. And the direct result was the CCA had to backtrack. They were forced to revise their guidelines, loosening the rules to allow negative depictions of drugs and other previously forbidden topics. It was a huge win for creative freedom, all because Stan decided to call their bluff.
He also used his Stan's soapbox column a lot during this time to talk about social issues, didn't he?
Yeah, he really leaned into that. He wasn't necessarily partisan, but he consistently used the column to speak out against racism, intolerance, prejudice. He positioned Marvel as a company that cared about these things.
But even with these victories, the grind of writing all those monthly books, it was getting to be too much.
It seems so. The deadlines, the sheer volume produced under the Marvel method, it must have been exhausting. In 1972, he officially stepped away from writing the monthly comics. He became the publisher.
When were his last regular issues?
Amazing Spider-Man, #110 in July 72, and Fantastic Four, #125 in August 72. That really marked the end of his 2-decade run as the day-to-day creative engine.
He even became president of the whole company for a bit, but didn't stick with that.
Yeah, that was brief. The sources say he stepped down pretty quickly because he found being president was too much about numbers and finance, and not enough about the creative process he enjoyed.
Interesting. So he didn't want the top corporate job focused on finance.
Right. But here's the irony. His next big move was all about corporate finance, just in a different arena. Hollywood. He shifted his focus almost entirely away from the nuts and bolts of comics creation.
Becoming the brand manager, the figurehead, developing Marvel's characters from movies and TV.
Exactly. This is where Stan Lee the ambassador, Stan Lee the personality, really takes over. To make that happen, he made a big move.
Moved out west, right, to L.A.
Yep, 1981. Settled in California to be closer to the entertainment industry, focusing on getting Marvel properties onto the screen.
He didn't completely abandon print, though. There was the Spider-Man newspaper strip.
Oh, yeah, that started back in 1977 with John Romita Sr. drawing it. Became hugely successful, ran for ages, and he did one last big project with Kirby, too.
The Silver Surfer graphic novel.
Silver Surfer, The Ultimate Cosmic Experience, 1978. A big, prestige format book, often considered Marvel's first real graphic novel. Still trying to elevate the medium even as he was shifting focus.
And then, especially after he officially retired from regular duties in the 90s, he really perfected the public persona.
Yeah.
Conventions, college lectures, and the cameos.
The cameos, they became his trademark, didn't they?
Yeah.
Popping up in almost every Marvel movie and TV show.
He was genius marketing, in a way. That familiar, smiling face, linking all these different adaptations together.
Totally. He got so many executive producer credits, made so many appearances. By the end, someone calculated he was technically the actor with the highest grossing film total ever, which is just a surreal title for a comic book writer.
Okay, so we're into the 2000s. Marvel movies are starting to become huge business, but Stan Lee himself is trying to launch new things outside of Marvel, right?
Yeah.
And this period gets complicated.
Yeah, really complicated. Lots of new ventures, lots of lawsuits, questions about who owned what. It's where the story gets pretty messy, honestly.
A lot of it seemed to revolve around IP, intellectual property.
Mm-hmm.
Who actually owned the rights to the characters he created or co-created.
Exactly. And it's confusing because you've got stuff he created while clearly an employee at Marvel, where the company generally owns the work-for-hire stuff, but then you have things he tried to create later under his own banner. The lines got blurry.
Let's start with a .com bubble venture. Stan Lee Media. What was that about?
That launched in 1998. He co-founded it with a guy named Peter Paul. The idea was to create brand new superheroes specifically for the internet, for digital media.
Very forward-thinking for 98. How did it go?
It blew up spectacularly. It went public in '99, stock price soared, classic.com hype. But by late 2000, investigators uncovered massive illegal stock manipulation by Peter Paul and another executive.
Was Lee involved in the shady stuff?
No, Stan himself was never implicated in the illegal financial dealings. But the company collapsed into Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2001, a total disaster.
But the ghost of Stanley Media lingered, didn't it? Because of the IP claims.
Oh, yeah. This is where it gets really wild. Years later, in 2007, the company under new ownership sued Marvel for $5 billion.
$5 billion? On what grounds?
They claim that back in 1998, Stan Lee had signed over his rights to many of his biggest Marvel characters, Spider-Man, Hulk, X-Men, the lot to Stan Lee Media in exchange for his stock and salary there.
Wait, could he even do that if he created them while working for Marvel decades earlier?
That was the billion-dollar question. Marvel argued, no way, these are work for hire, we own them outright. Stan Lee Media argued Stan somehow retained rights that he could and did transfer to them. It was this incredibly complex legal battle over ownership and Stan's exact contractual status over the years.
How did that end?
Ultimately, the courts sided with Marvel, dismissing the claims, but the fact that it even got that far shows how murky the waters were around his IP.
So while all that Stanley Media drama was unfolding, Lee starts another company, POW Entertainment.
Yep. Founded in 2001 with partners Gil Champion and Arthur Lieberman, POW stood for Purveyors of Wonder. This one was meant to create new, non-Marvel properties for film, TV, games.
And what kind of stuff came out of POW?
Some interesting projects. There was an animated series for Spike TV called Stripperella, starring Pamela Anderson.
Stripperella, okay.
Yeah, and a reality TV show on the Sci-Fi Channel called Who Wants to Be a Superhero, where Stan himself was the host and judge. Kind of campy fun.
And around this time, he did that surprising collaboration with DC Comics, right?
Yeah, the Just Imagine series in 2001. DC basically gave him the keys to their kingdom. He got to reimagine origins for Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, his own spin on the DC icons. It showed he was really seen as an industry legend by then, beyond just Marvel.
But even as he's playing nice with DC, he's fighting with Marvel again.
Yeah.
This time about movie profits.
Right. The first X-Men movie came out in 2000, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man in 2002, huge blockbusters, and Stan sued Marvel in 2002.
Not over ownership this time, but over money he was owed.
Exactly. His contract apparently stipulated he get 10% of the profits from movies and TV shows based on his characters. When these films made fortunes, Lee claimed Marvel wasn't paying him his share.
And Marvel's argument was?
Classic Hollywood accounting, basically. They argued the 10% was of net profits, not gross. And after they deducted all their costs and overhead, well, wouldn't you know it, there weren't really any net profits left to share.
Unbelievable. How did that get resolved?
They settled out of court in 2005. The amount wasn't disclosed, but reports called it a seven-figure sum. So he got paid eventually, and it seemed to confirm he was contractually due a significant chunk for Marvel's screen success.
Okay, so that's settled. But then we get to the really difficult final years of his life, especially after his wife Joan died in 2017. Things seem to spiral, legally and personally.
Yeah, that period is just sad and messy. Joan had been his rock for almost 70 years. After she passed, he seemed quite vulnerable. He was in his mid-90s, his health wasn't great.
And suddenly there are lawsuits involving his own company, POW Entertainment.
Right. In 2018, POW got acquired by a company called Kamsing International. Shortly after, Stan filed this shocking $1 billion lawsuit against POW itself.
$1 billion. Claiming what?
He claimed he'd been tricked by POW's CEO and co-founder into signing away the exclusive rights to his name, likeness, and all his IP. He said he thought he was signing something non-exclusive.
How does Stan Lee, the guy who'd navigated decades of deals, get tricked into signing something like that? It seems hard to believe.
That's what's so troubling. The context suggests he was really not himself in those final months. Grieving, isolated, maybe confused. The people around him were changing rapidly. It seems plausible he wasn't fully understanding the documents being put in front of him. He was extremely vulnerable.
And didn't he drop that lawsuit fairly quickly?
Yeah, just a few months later, July 2018, he put out a statement saying it had all been confusing, even to him, and he was happy to be working with POW again. That quick reversal kind of suggests the problem was the chaos surrounding him, maybe people manipulating him, rather than a straightforward case of fraud he could easily prove.
But the legal battles over his legacy continued even after his death, didn't they? With his daughter, J.C. Lee.
Right. In 2019, J.C. Lee sued POW, basically trying to reclaim those IP rights, arguing her father had been misled in deals going way back.
How did that turn out?
It's not well for her. The court threw out the lawsuit in 2020, calling it frivolous and improper. They actually sanctioned J.C. Lee $1 million, and her lawyers another $250,000 for even bringing the suit. It just shows how tangled and ultimately unproductive these IP fights became.
Beyond the corporate lawsuits, there were also those really disturbing elder abuse allegations in his final year or so.
Yeah, that was heartbreaking. Reports surfaced in 2018 claiming people around him were taking advantage of his vulnerability after Joan's death, mismanaging his finances, estimated around $50 million.
Who were the main figures accused?
One was a business manager named Kia Morgan. He was accused of isolating Stan from longtime friends and family, controlling his affairs. Morgan actually faced criminal charges in 2019 for things like false imprisonment, grand theft from an elder, fraud, forgery, really serious stuff.
And there was another manager Stan himself sued.
Gerardo Olivares. Stan's own lawsuit called him one of several unscrupulous businessmen who swooped in when he was vulnerable. The suit alleged Olivares got power of attorney, changed Stan's will, moved millions out of his accounts, even bought himself a condo with Stan's money.
Just a tragic end, filled with this kind of conflict. Such a stark contrast to the optimistic, heroic worlds he created.
It really is. And we should also briefly mention there were allegations of sexual harassment made against him by a few nurses in early 2018. He strongly denied them, claiming it was an attempt at extortion, just adding to the turmoil of those final months. It's a really sobering final chapter to an incredible career.
Let's pull back from that darkness, though, and focus on the positive legacy. The personal milestones, the huge cultural impact, the recognition he received. His marriage, for instance.
Yes, Stan and Joan Bucock. She was originally from Newcastle, England. They got married way back in December 1947, and they were together for 69 years until she passed in 2017. By all accounts, she was a huge influence, a real anchor for him. Her death clearly hit him incredibly hard.
They had kids.
2 daughters, Joan Celia, who goes by JC, born in 1950, and then tragically their second daughter, Jan, died just a few days after she was born in 1953.
Wow, I didn't know that. So JC was their only surviving child. Where did they live mostly?
They had a classic New York suburban life on Long Island for many years while he was running Marvel day to day. Then, after the move to California in the 80s, they settled in West Hollywood, apparently in a house previously owned by Jack Benny's announcer, Don Wilson. A little bit of old Hollywood history there.
And Stan always seemed passionate about literacy and education, right?
Mm-hmm.
He started a foundation.
He did. The Stan Lee Foundation, launched in 2010. Its main focus was supporting literacy programs, education initiatives, and access to the arts, especially trying to promote diversity and reach underserved communities.
And the official awards and honors really piled up over the years, didn't they?
Yeah.
It shows how the establishment eventually recognized his impact.
Oh, definitely. He got inducted into pretty much every Hall of Fame that matters in comics. The Will Eisner Award Hall of Fame in '94, the Jack Kirby Hall of Fame in '95.
He even got the National Medal of Arts.
Yeah, presented by President George W. Bush in 2008. That's a huge deal for someone from the world of comics. And Disney made him a Disney legend in 2017 alongside Jack Kirby, which felt fitting.
Cities named days after him, too.
Yep. Los Angeles, Boston, New York City all declared a Stan Lee Day at various points. And maybe the most touching recognition came after his death in 2019.
What was that?
They renamed a section of University Avenue in the Bronx, right where he grew up in that small apartment during the tough years. They named it Stan Lee Way.
Wow. Talk about coming full circle. From the struggling kid dreaming of novels to having the street named after him.
It's pretty incredible. And then there's the whole phenomenon of the fictional Stan Lee, the character he played in his own comics and cameos.
When did that start? Was the Fantastic Four cover the first time?
That FF Tag 10 cover from 1963, where he and Kirby are shown creating the comic while the FF menace them outside, that's probably the most famous early one. But technically, he appeared even earlier. Apparently, he showed up as a background character, the third assistant office boy, in a Terry Toons comic way back in 1943. He was always putting himself in the picture.
And he kept doing it in the comics, right? Showing up at weddings, in crowds.
Yeah, he officiated Luke Cage and Jessica Jones's wedding in the comics in 2006. He became part of the fabric of the Marvel Universe itself.
His persona got so big, even his collaborators started referencing him. Kirby's
Ugh.
parody.
Funky Flashman. Yeah, in Kirby's Mr. Miracle series for DC in the early 70s after their big split, Funky Flashman was this loud, cigar-chomping, money-grubbing huckster. It was seen by many as a pretty savage parody of Stan Lee's promotional side. Shows you the complexity of that relationship.
And speaking of DC, his final cameo was kind of perfect, wasn't it? In the Teen Titans Go movie.
That was brilliant. He pops up, does his usual enthusiastic cameo thing, then suddenly realizes, wait a minute, this is a DC movie, I gotta get out of here, and runs off.
It just showed he'd transcended being just the Marvel guy. He was Stan Lee, legend of the whole industry.
Absolutely. His persona was bigger than any one company by then.
So his final years, we know they were tough. When did he actually pass away?
November 12th, 2018. He was 95 years old. He'd had health issues for a while, got a pacemaker back in 2012. The official cause of death listed cardiac arrest, respiratory failure, and congestive heart failure. Aspiration pneumonia was also a factor.
And there was that touching story from Roy Thomas, who visited him right near the end.
Yeah, Roy Thomas, who basically took over from Stan as Marvel's editor-in-chief back in '72. He went to see Stan just 2 days before he died, mostly to talk about a book project, the Stan Lee story.
And Stan's last words to him were?
According to Thomas, Stan said, "God bless. Take care of my boy, Roy."
Which sounds like he's talking about Spider-Man, his most famous creation. My boy.
That's what a lot of people thought initially. But Roy Thomas clarified later. Stan apparently had a longtime nickname for him, Roy the Boy, like Stan, called himself Stan the Man. So it was likely a much more personal farewell. Take care of my boy, Roy, meant take care of yourself, Roy.
Okay. That makes it even more poignant in a way. A reminder of the real human connections beneath the larger-than-life persona.
So when you put it all together, the kid dreaming of literary fame, the editor who hated the corporate side but revolutionized comics, the Marvel Method creator, the guy caught up in all those IP lawsuits. It's this massive creative paradox, isn't it?
Totally. He starts out almost ashamed of comics, wanting to write the great American novel.
Right. And he ends up creating this modern mythology of superheroes precisely because he infused them with the kind of flawed humanity, the vulnerability, the complex emotions you usually find in literary fiction.
It wasn't just the characters themselves that lasted, was it? Or the movies. His biggest impact might have been that method.
I think you could argue that. The Marvel Method, for all its flaws and the credit disputes it caused, fundamentally changed how comics were made. It blurred the lines between writer and artist, created this chaotic collaborative energy that defined the Silver Age and honestly still influences storytelling today. He figured out how to mass-produce relatable flaws.
He turned anxiety into a global brand.
In a way, yeah. Which brings us back to Excelsior. Always upward. What does that really mean for a legacy like his? So much incredible creative achievement, reaching these amazing heights, but also ending with so much conflict, legal trouble, personal sadness.
It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? For you, the listener, where's the line between genuine artistic creation and just relentless self-promotion? Does the end result, this pantheon of heroes that millions connect with, characters who teach about responsibility, prejudice, does that amazing result excuse or overshadow the messy, sometimes ugly process of how it got made? The fights over credit, the money disputes.
Yeah, what's the big takeaway from Stan Lee's incredible, complicated life? Is it the power of imagination, the importance of collaboration, the dangers of fame, the tragedy of those final years?
Maybe it's all of it, the flawed humanity he put into his characters. Maybe that was just reflecting the flawed humanity in all of us, including himself, right up to the end. Something to think about.
Definitely. Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you next time.